I want to call to order a meeting of the Planning Commission for a public hearing. We have two ordinances we need to give public hearings to. Chris, can I ask you to explain ordinance 543? That's ordinance 543, please.
That's yes. What you have in front of you is ordinance 543. As we've done before in your role as the Planning Commission, all amendments, this is a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance. All zoning ordinance amendments first go to the Planning Commission for a recommendation. And the ordinance states that part of your recommendation, you hold a public hearing. So that's what this is. And in general, this was initiated by council, and it amends three different zoning districts. Section 1 refers to the light industrial office district. And of course, the bold is added language. If it's not bold except for the sections, it's existing language. So the first part of ordinance 543 amends the light industrial office district zone to add that number 4. And it adds as a use permitted by right, the following uses are permitted as a matter of right. It adds number 4, marijuana product manufacturing facilities and marijuana testing facilities. Marijuana cultivation facilities and retail marijuana stores are prohibited uses and will not be permitted. Excuse me. And that same language is added to the industrial office park zone, the IOP zone. Number 14, same exact language. And that same exact language, again, allowing those uses as a permitted use as a matter of right, is also added to the industrial district, the I district, in section 3. This ordinance also adds a whole new section on the last page, the second to last page, section 4. It adds a section 230-39.1, marijuana related businesses, and states no marijuana related business shall be permitted in any zoning district within the city except as explicitly provided in this chapter. So it explicitly permits marijuana product manufacturing facilities and marijuana testing facilities, and explicitly prohibits marijuana cultivation facilities and retail marijuana stores. And then adds that broader language that says adds that new section, no marijuana related business shall be permitted in any district except explicitly provided in this chapter.
And so the zoning that's allowed is within this with LIL.
It adds
The light industrial office, they're allowed to do it, but nowhere else. That's basically what it's saying, correct?
it adds that permitted use.
Okay.
It adds marijuana product manufacturing facilities and marijuana testing facilities as a permitted use to 3 zoning districts, not just the LI, the the light industrial office district. Industrial office park district. And the industrial district. So it permits those uses in those three zoning districts.
We're just reading these, right? We're not discussing them until the meeting, correct?
Well, we're here to get public comment, and then I think it would be appropriate for me to add some staff comments at the public hearing level, so you have some time to think about it. I guess. So it would be, if everybody's okay with their understanding of what the ordinance does, you can take public comment.
Do I have any public comments on this?
Well, I'd like to know exactly what you're saying that,
And I guess.
Your name and address, please.
I'm sorry, Village. And Yaski, 128 East Second Street. Are you saying that marijuana cultivation and whatever you're talking about is permitted in those?
Would be,
Would be.
if this is passed, it would be permitted.
Is. Well, I'd like to ask if you think that's a good idea. Before you vote, I mean, is that, do you?
Well, we didn't propose this.
Again, this is just this is the public hearing.
Mhm.
They're gonna get into the discussion during the regular meeting, so the purpose of this portion of the meeting is the hearing. We're just here to take public comment and not really
Okay,
get into debates or question and answers.
well, as a citizen of Newcastle, I like to say it sounds like a bad idea. Simply put.
Can I ask a quick question of you?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll clarify things also for the folks we have here today. So was this a request from a specific company that is planning to do business there, or was there some need to add this specifically, or that you're aware of?
I don't know. All I saw was when I looked up the first reading, it appeared to be offered by Councilman Day. So I don't. The first I really saw of it was when it was going to be on the agenda for today's meeting. I don't know the exact genesis of it.
Chris, can I ask a clarifying question? So I just want to confirm, so I'm looking at section 1, number 4. So marijuana product manufacturing facilities and marijuana testing facilities are allowed. However, marijuana cultivation facilities and retail marijuana stores are prohibited uses. So they can do testing and I guess for lack of a better word, packing or experimental work. However, there will not be a grow facility and there will not be a dispensary, correct? Essentially in more common language.
That's the way I read the retail portion, referred to as dispensary. And I guess while it's a good segue, is there, we don't want to cut off anybody. Well,
I do know the state law kind of looks at each of those as independent operations, cultivating it, manufacturing it and testing it. And then retail.
I'm just making sure that I understand that we're allowing one and not the other, or we're allowing part of that.
Yeah.
so,
In those specific districts.
so what I handed out is what, and I know we're still in the public comment stage, but I think it would help everybody. I didn't know what any of those were. And having looked at zoning ordinances for, a very long time, you typically have definitions for specific uses or specific references. So I went and found what I hope was the state law that was passed. And it took the definitions from the state law, and I recommend that in that handout, that there would be definitions added, that as part of your recommendation, you recommend that those definitions be added. And those are, all of that is right from the House bill. I don't have the number, I should have the number. But it's my understanding that all of those definitions are right from the House bill that was passed by Dover. And those are the specific definitions from the state code. And I recommend that all of those be added to the zoning ordinance as part of this ordinance, because 2 years from now, somebody reading the zoning ordinance may not know what a marijuana product manufacturing facility is. And it's very specific in the law. And you could read the definitions right here. I created the marijuana retail store because there wasn't any reference to, there were certainly references to retail in the state law, but not we would be able to use in a zoning ordinance.
So Chris,
Yes.
HB1 regulates legal personal use of marijuana. HB2 establishes and regulates the Delaware marijuana industry. So it's HB2.
Thank you. And then that language that prohibits cultivation facility and retail marijuana stores, we're only, and this is why zoning ordinances get confusing. We're only dealing with 3 zones. And you have a multitude of zoning districts in your zoning ordinance. So I was concerned that if you were explicitly prohibiting those 2 uses, but you're only doing it in 3 zones, one could interpret that if another zone is silent on it, that the framers of the ordinance thought not to prohibit it in those other zoning districts. So I recommend that we strike that last sentence from the 3 zoning districts language and add it to the universal section that's being added, section 230-39.1. And therefore it applies everywhere. That at the bottom of my handout, section 230-39.1 would be amended further to state that marijuana cultivation facilities and marijuana retail stores are prohibited uses in all zoning districts. I believe that was the intent of city council. But if we only prohibit it explicitly in 3 districts, that
No, that makes sense.
really doesn't, you can easily interpret that in a improper way. Does that make sense?
Were there any other public comments about that ordinance? You can state your name and address also.
Yeah, Bill Gross, 1301 13th Street. I just can't even imagine that in the historic town of Newcastle, that this is even being considered. We already have a store in the center, in the heart, in a historic building that's selling CBD oil. And I can tell you at least 7 of my friends, and being involved in a lot of different organizations, where people have said, is that where historic Newcastle is headed? So I really would say, just ask yourself, when you moved into the area, did you want the historic city of Newcastle to be like everywhere else? Or did you want it to be family oriented, historically oriented, and something that was a standout different from everywhere else? There's no way that this should even be considered. But if it is up and it is being considered, I just say it's not the place, not the time. Today, tomorrow, next year, 200 years from now. Because what you say today, what you vote on today, what you decide on today is gonna be something that's gonna be standardized forever, and there's no going back. So I would just ask yourself those questions. Are we also talking about ordinance 544?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
So are you saying you think we should not prohibit the sale of marijuana?
No,
You concur that we should pass this?
correct.
Okay, that would have been
Sorry.
easier to say.
Yeah,
Okay.
I apologize, because seems like a lot of ordinances, since they're not like they used to be where you could click on the city site to read it. I must admit, I was at a slight disadvantage, but thank you for one clarification. I apologize for being murky.
Short and sweet. That's what we want. Any other comments on ordinance 543? Okay, none being heard.
Technically, you should make a motion to close the public hearing on ordinance 543. And then make another motion in second.
To hear the,
Yes,
Chris, I'm glad you're here to keep us straight. Okay, I make a motion that we close the hearing for ordinance 543. Second, all in favor or discussion, anybody? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I now make a motion to open the hearing for ordinance 544. Do you want to explain that?
ordinance 544 is an amendment to section 230-28A15A5, which is the parking section. That's the parking section of the zoning ordinance. And it simply deletes in section 1, and it removes that language apartments colon 1.5 spaces per unit, replaced with omitted. And the issue is that that section 230-28 refers specifically to the DG zone. So only in the DG zone are apartment units allowed, required, permitted to provide 1.5 spaces per unit. Elsewhere in the code, it's 2 spaces per unit. So this is meant to do away with that perceived conflict in this section and the other section of the ordinance.
So it's just basically confirming 2 spaces per unit, consistent with the language in other areas.
Yes.
Do I have any public comments on that? Short.
Phil Gross, 1301 13th Street. I had a question about the off-street parking and loading. Can you clarify that part of it? And I guess I'm asking because if a store, retail has loading and unloading, it should be strictly done on their own property and not in a public space or public street. It should be restricted to its own property. So I just want to make sure what this ordinance change means.
Just to clarify, all this ordinance, all it does is remove that section where apartments can provide 1.5 spaces per unit in the DG zone. And by default, you would then go to another section, which I have comments on in the other handout.
So this is only applicable to apartment buildings, not to retail businesses.
Okay, so again, by changing this, will this make sure that loading and
It will
unloading?
have nothing to do with retail.
I know, but with the residential and apartments, will that mandate by changing it, keep it to loading and unloading is only to be done on the property of the apartment complex? I mean, what does this change?
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, madam. We don't, it changed what we said it changed. We're not here to, we're just
So
here to
what-
take public comment.
When somebody's gonna build one, they're now required to have 2 spaces per each apartment they're gonna build.
I get
Not
that
one.
part.
So
I'm
that's all
referring
the stuff.
strictly to the loading,
That has nothing to do with this.
so why is it on there?
Because that's what's encompassed in the entire ordinance.
But that part isn't being changed. Only the
Okay.
part about how many spaces.
Okay.
Yes, the name, the title of Article 5 is off-street parking and loading requirements. It's just the title. This ordinance does not change anything about loading or
Okay,
parking on site or off site. It simply deletes the lesser requirement of 1.5 spaces per unit in the DG zone and replaces it by default with another section that I have a comment on.
okay. Thank you.
Do you want to give your comment now, or are there any other comments on this?
Again, the only other reference to the parking for multifamily dwellings or apartment would be section 230-28.A.1E. And this is typical of zoning ordinances. It refers to multiple dwellings, 2 spaces per unit. In the DG zone, multifamily, there's no reference to multiple. Multifamily apartments are referred to as multifamily dwellings in the DG zone. So there's not even, there's no definition for multifamily dwelling. So I thought that it would be prudent to amend in addition to the proposed amendment to amend section 230-28A1E to read multifamily dwellings and residential components of mixed-use buildings, 2 spaces per unit. And that would clearly cover the DG zone where we hope to have mixed-use developments. If not, then it would apply to multifamily. And then since there's no definition for multifamily dwellings in the zoning ordinance, I recommend adding that definition.
So you're talking about removing where it says residential structures, E, multifamily dwellings, and replacing it with what you said? Adding another area that says this.
We're amending in a section that's not even covered in the ordinance that you have in front of you.
Oh,
Because that's what you would go, 230-28A1E is now where we would go to figure out what the parking would be in the DG zone, because it covers parking everywhere.
okay, so we're talking about also amending that section so that they could be consistent.
Yes,
Okay, gotcha.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
No, that's okay. It's all new to me. I'm figuring it all. Okay.
So this 230-28 is off-street parking and loading requirements. In section A, 1, what we're proposing to amend is our residential structures.
Okay.
And in that section is where it says multiple dwellings, 2 spaces per unit. But that's not the correct reference for apartments. It's not a very good definition.
Okay, got it. You have any other comments on this? Do I have any other public comments on ordinance 544? Do I have a motion to close the hearing for ordinance 544?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, what time is it? Oh, we can start our next meeting. Do I have a motion to close the hearing for the ordinances?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is closed, and since it is 7:11, I'm going to make a motion that we start our planning commission meeting. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay,
Lindy, I'm just putting masks up for when.
be my guest. Can I have a roll call of the members of the commission in attendance?
Ray Rivera.
Vera Worthy, Margot Rain,
Tim Gibbs.
David Marquetti.
and then, the minutes for the October 27th meeting are in your packets. Are there any corrections to those minutes? I am hearing none, so I'm assuming we have no corrections to these minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as distributed? Well, I'm gonna take you as a second, Bree.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we have approved the minutes. Public comments on agenda items. Do I have any comments on the agenda items for this meeting?
Well, Bill Gross, 1301 13th Street. Agenda item 6. Again, the words keep coming up, off-street parking and loading requirements. If that's only the title, why is it? I'm just trying to follow the bouncing ball. I mean, is there any consideration to any changes of anything that would allow apartments, houses, shopping centers, anything that's being considered for construction to allow for a change in loading and unloading?
No,
Okay.
Do I have any other public comments? Public comment before. Council discussion regarding ordinance 543 regarding the marijuana related businesses.
Yes, if nobody else has anything, just to follow up, obviously I'm new here, does this, I guess let me put all my words together first. We're discussing saying that the sale is prohibited throughout all the districts, correct? And that includes any product or byproduct of marijuana, CBD, hemp, anything like that.
I think the answer to that is yes.
So keeping the language. Marijuana cultivation facilities. And retail marijuana stores are prohibited. In the city. By this ordinance. The way, if you go with. The recommended language that we talked about tonight, I think it's clear. That it's permitted everywhere. I mean, it's prohibited everywhere, excuse me. It's prohibited in all zoning districts. Those two uses.
And is that for occupancies or businesses that are specifically selling that, or is that for a convenience store that also sells a marijuana product?
That's a good question.
'Cause I understand like the dispensary part,
Right.
if you were to put a dispensary in some of the areas of the town, it wouldn't be overwhelmingly.
You still have House Bill 2? Because I didn't, this is all referring to marijuana, and I didn't. House Bill 2 did not have a definition for marijuana. It referred to.
Cannabis?
No, it referred to the section that I'm referring to, Title 16.
Oh.
Let me. So. We've added a definition of marijuana.
Mhm.
By referring to
Through the state code.
the state code and. 16.
I think you're right. I mean, my sense is from the way this is written, if you had a business that sold something else, you wouldn't be prohibited from selling marijuana. Now, I don't know if the state will allow a bakery to also sell marijuana cookies. I mean, I just don't know the answer to that.
But what about your definition here? That's not.
Yeah,
It says a retail establishment that sells marijuana products directly to the public. Is that not addressing?
Yeah, so the definition of marijuana, per that reference to Title 164701, I don't know if it's gonna answer your question, but marijuana means all parts of the plant, cannabis sativa, whether growing or not, the seeds thereof, the resin extracted from any part of the plant, and every compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of the plant, its seeds or resin. B, marijuana does not include any of the following: the mature stalks of the plant, fiber product produced from the stalks, oil or cake made from the seeds of the plant, or any other compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of the mature stalks, except the resin extracted therefrom, fiber, oil, or cake, or the sterilized seed of the plant, which is incapable of germination. 2, this is, again, does not include, marijuana does not include products approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and marijuana does not include industrial hemp as defined in subsection 2801. So I don't know where CBD falls into that.
I guess my follow-up question to that is, question and statement is, I can think of two businesses immediately offhand that this affects. One's a sale facility, one's a processing facility and an
Existing?
industrial park, yes,
Here
in Delaware, yeah.
in Delaware or in Newcastle?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, so we already have these
So, and
businesses.
I guess my follow-up to that is, did council provide any notes as to what their intention was with this, or just kind of just get dropped in our laps and we either get to be the good folks or the bad folks?
If they did provide notes, I wasn't
I've
involved with it,
never
but I
heard
got
any.
this as part of the packet. I talked briefly about it with the city solicitor, letting them know that I was gonna be suggesting definitions. So I don't,
That's why I asked about like, what was the intent? Because to me, it looks like it's specifically related to just light industrial, meaning that there's an industrial park business that is looking to manufacture or do something with these types of products. And that's why they're making the change so that this business could operate in the industrial parks.
Or
And there's already one that does that, so I don't know.
So
if
maybe it's
we're-
in reference to that same one, I don't know.
Which industrial park is it in and what do they do?
Lupin's Drive, they deal with the oils.
They deal with the oils, okay.
so I don't know whether it's to recognize, whether the intent is to recognize an existing business and make clear that it's conforming to the zone, or
Not conforming.
well,
Are they but you said there is a retail
I believe so.
component, okay.
It should be included.
It also would beg the question, if that business is already existing, do they become grandfathered? Or are they suddenly operating illegally?
standard zoning ordinance law would be if it's an existing conforming, legally conforming use, and it's made non-conforming as a result of an amendment, it retains its non-conforming status. I mean, there's
It's
special,
grandfathered,
it's
okay.
grandfathered, and I don't have, but generally, those are allowed to continue for, unless they discontinue for like a year period.
Yeah, so I mean, my understanding, and I just want to make sure it's clear to me and everybody else here, is that this ordinance is only specific to light industrial zones as noted, correct? Not anything anywhere outside of them, that we are allowing now the manufacturing facilities and testing facilities, but no retail and no cultivation. Is that correct? So
You're allowing marijuana product manufacturing facilities and marijuana testing facilities in 3 industrial zones.
yes, they're industrial zones. They're
Yes.
not anywhere citywide. They're just in these specific industrial zones that are not accessible necessarily to the public. That is the goal of this, right? So that they're not selling directly to our community per se. They may distribute on a website or somewhere else, but there's no direct retail sales from that location,
Well, technically,
Right,
if
it's
you're
right.
selling online, that's retail.
but not like in person though, like.
It doesn't matter. I think you'd still be considered retail if you're selling
Yeah.
online. I'm almost wondering if we need to send this back to council with some clarifying questions before we vote on this?
I would say if anything, we table it until we can get a further definition or further
Yeah.
explanation of what they're looking to do specifically. Unless Chris has.
Are you okay with?
You typically don't table things where you're making recommendations. You either take your best shot at it or pass it on with saying with the noted clarification. That's just my experience. I mean, we're here to make a recommendation. The way I read it is they are explicitly permitting those 2 uses as uses permitted by right. That is marijuana product manufacturing facilities and marijuana testing facilities. Now we have a definition that we didn't have before in the ordinance that was passed to you with, if you recommend this. So there are definitions for those 2 things, for those 2 uses. And those would,
But I'm not sure what the goal is. So I don't know if this is getting to the goal, because I don't know what the goal is. And And I really want some clarification around if somebody that can you only sell marijuana related products in a facility that only sells marijuana related products? Or could you have a retail store that sells other retail items in addition to? Because the way this reads, it's only gonna be applicable if you're only selling marijuana related products. It doesn't say a retail store may not sell any kind of marijuana related products.
Marijuana, retail marijuana store. So,
But does this not,
So I think-
definition that you're providing, does it answer that? Where it says a retail establishment that sells marijuana products directly to the public, so that is prohibited
correct,
according to this definition.
yes.
So, and if it's a manufacturing facility in an industrial area, is permissible if passed, is or recommended, is permissible only if that manufacturing facility is selling to a retail store.
Yes,
Not
they're allowed to sell to a retail store.
Yes,
right, but not consumers,
to
right?
not to consumers.
Yeah.
By definition, no. Marijuana product manufacturing facility.
Actually, I'm not sure you're allowed to sell marijuana online. Cause I think you have to get proof of age before you, kind of like. Yeah, they do sell alcohol online now.
So I guess the clarifying thing would be that, within those three zones that are outlined in the ordinance, you can, there can be product manufacturing facilities and testing facilities. However, if Walgreens wanted to sell CBD oil, they cannot.
I don't know the answer to that, because I don't know how CBD relates.
And see, I think that's the real
It's
question.
a specific derivative of marijuana, and by the definition that he provided, I'm not clear either on
Yeah,
where it falls within that, because there are some derivatives that are not considered marijuana because of how they're processed or grown or where they came from, exactly what part of the plant. I don't know enough about it to
Agreed.
feel comfortable saying that like it covers it or it doesn't cover it.
Well, if we can't table it, then the only other option is to decline, not recommend it. I would prefer to at least table it and send it back for more clarification and some better answers.
the question being, did the council intend to prohibit the sale of other
Byproducts.
byproducts, is that CBD? Is that a,
I'm assuming, so. I don't know that much about it,
yeah, I don't,
but I know that in the same sense that falls into, or that gets lumped into the same category.
but just anecdotally, and
Yeah.
this is not my professional, opinion, I mean, haven't those products been in stores for some time now?
It depends. Because there's some of those oils that, and I don't know the technical. The part that relieves pain is regulated different than the part that gives you a high. They can separate out those two pieces from the marijuana plant, that much I know.
If.
But
Sorry,
and I don't have an answer for, as Bree said, can Walgreens sell it?
the unknown derivatives that we're talking about, or
Or
marijuana?
marijuana.
Either or.
The unknown derivatives. I mean, marijuana is pretty clear. That's a
Yeah,
no.
like,
But whatever the derivatives are, like how far does a marijuana product go in the letter of the law?
I don't know how the definition of marijuana that I read from the state law relates to the products that you're talking about.
Well, folks, Walgreens, does sell CBD products in Delaware.
Oh, there you go. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Oh, my God.
You want to stock up?
No.
So I,
So can I ask, if we do not recommend this, and the language potentially could stay as is that an issue? If we do not include this, considering that there may already be businesses that we're not doing this, I don't know.
well, number one is just a recommendation.
Mhm.
So you're here to give your best judgment of what you think it should be. Because it's a land use issue and a zoning ordinance issue. So if you don't make a recommendation because you're unclear or,
Does it leave it too open and vague, and so
Light
people
industrial.
could potentially do more than we would like them to do if we don't define this now?
well, the council, if you don't make a recommendation, I'm gonna be making this recommendation to the council. Because I think the ordinance needs to be cleaned up
At minimum, right.
You know,
I'm clarifying.
to add the definitions and to prohibit retail sale in all of the districts, not just the three. That's, I think they were trying to allow certain types of marijuana, the product manufacturing and the testing in those districts, in those industrial districts,
But prohibit the sale.
but prohibit the sale, but the language was a little fuzzy about where the prohibition.
But that's the goal to prohibit. sale.
Yeah. CBD, I will defer to the planning commission if you think that this should be expanded to prohibit the sale of other derivatives such as CBD.
The bigger issue is. And I don't know the answer to this. Right now, nobody could sell any kind of retail product unless you have a medical prescription. Right now, that's the situation. They've passed the law that you will be able to, but those licenses won't even be available till, I think, somewhere between May and July of 2024. So I have a client that wants to open up one of these things and I know a tiny bit about it, but assuming, just because they can sell CBD oil now, I don't know what Walgreens or anybody else is gonna be able to sell a year from now. So I don't know if this is going to do what somebody's trying to prohibit. Cause
To the extent that Walgreens wants to sell marijuana as defined by state code, they won't be able to do it in the city of Newcastle for the zoning ordinance. If this is passed.
So if it's passed, we at least put a restriction on the sale within the city of things that fall within those guidelines by the state.
You are gonna be prohibiting marijuana retail stores in the city of Newcastle.
But there's a difference between a marijuana retail store and then a retail store that also sells marijuana. And this, to me, implies that selling marijuana products is the only thing they're selling. Which to me opens the door. If I'm selling other stuff, I can now sell that because that's not the only thing I'm selling. And that I think needs to be clarified.
See, I guess I interpret that completely different. It's clear to me from the definition, that's why I keep going back to it, a retail establishment that sells marijuana. If you're selling soda, whatever, but if you're also selling marijuana, I guess I just interpret it as you can't do it. Or it's not permissible. I mean, that's just how I interpret it, but I guess it's just individual interpretation.
Maybe instead of a retail establishment, it should say any retail establishment that sells marijuana, so that it's clear that regardless of what type of establishment.
That would
It would be clarified a little bit more that any type of retail establishment.
But
Good job, Bree, thanks.
In that part. I don't know, I mean, it almost sounds to me that by at least putting in this language, we're at least restricting some of the business. I don't know if, you know, about the light industrial uses that we're now permitting or giving permission to be done. I think you said they may be being done already. I don't really know. But I do like that we're at least putting in language that will restrict the retail sale of it within the city limits, because if the laws are changing and more places are gonna be able to sell this and sell it easier, then we at least have something in our city code that will then define what that is and restrict it.
I sense that's what the intent was. And
It's not gonna mean that people in the city of Newcastle aren't gonna get a hold of marijuana. I mean, they go to Newark and get it. Okay. So we need a motion.
I mean, I'll motion to approve, if we're at least putting the language to restrict the retail portion. And everything else is restricted to just light industrial, I think I would be okay with that.
Or does that include including the definitions and your change from a retail to any retail? Second motion.
But we need to be clear. So we're gonna approve the ordinance with the inclusion of the additional definitions as presented by Chris
and the other changes to the
and the,
other sections. not just
and the related changes to the other sections.
Yes,
With the,
with the one changed from A to any under marijuana retail store.
Okay. Okay,
That's my motion.
David, did you still want to second that?
Get it?
All in favor, say, oh, discussion. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? How do you vote? Did you vote? You voted, Tamara? Okay. So, motion is passed. Okay, ordinance 544, eliminating the discrepancy between some apartments requiring 1.5 spaces and some requiring 2. To be everybody reading required 2 spaces, parking spaces per apartment. Any discussion?
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Do I have a motion that I'm gonna move that we approve ordinance 544 with the inclusion of the amended language from Chris.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Vote. Okay. Buttonwood. Subdivision lots 152 and 53. Rocky?
Yes.
Sorry, we had to make you wait so long.
No, got to stay up for your one. You like these? You want me to tell you what we're requesting here? Okay. We have a large lot here and we simply would like to
subdivided into two smaller lots of roughly equivalent size. The history of the property is that originally it was two separate lots, but along the way, when someone purchased those lots, then it was considered one parcel after that and just assigned one parcel number. We would just like to revert it back to the original two lots and the same dimensions and sizes that they were.
Are you gonna be putting single family homes?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The zoning would allow for semi-detached houses, but we're gonna make them detached, single family.
How many?
Two,
So one on each lot.
right?
Would you mind just saying your name and address?
Oh, Francis Diascanis, 225 East Second Street.
I have a question for you, Chris. You had, done a letter.
Mhm.
On number 7, where you mentioned about, building bulk should be changed to 30% per the schedule of district regulations. Is that something that's gonna change the size of anything? I didn't understand what that percentage was in reference to.
Maximum building bulk, that is referring to. It's not going to change, the buildability of the lots. It's just the wrong reference. And maximum building bulk percentage refers to percent under maximum building bulk refers to the floor area of the footprint of the building divided by the area of the lot upon which the building is located.
So you're saying basically the floor plan can't be more than 30%, is that?
Of the lot area.
Okay.
The garage that's on there, is that gonna go away or are you gonna keep that?
That's gonna stay.
Oh, okay.
That's why we did change the lot line a little bit in the back. Because the zoning code requires this garage to be at least 5 feet from the property line.
Oh, okay.
And as it was a little closer than that, so we moved the line over a little bit so it would stay in conformance with the zoning code. Building code.
Anybody have any more questions?
So you have a letter dated November 26th or November 22nd in your packet. I actually spoke to Mr. Diascanis' surveyor. We've already worked, you've already submitted a revised plan, but I didn't want to rush it to get it on the agenda. And we discussed. Does anybody have any questions about the letter? The only thing that I would change as a result of my discussion with Mr. Diascanis' surveyor, he brought up a good point. Item number 6, I had suggested that the building setback lines, side yard setback lines be shown graphically along the interior line. You kind of talked me out of that because in the zoning ordinance, you have 10-foot minimum side yards. Already. And, but
The aggregate.
is it
15 aggregate sound. Minimum of 5.
is it a minimum of 5? Is that what's shown on the plan?
Minimum of 5 feet from the
5
property
feet
line?
from the side, yeah, from the side property line, yeah.
And then because that garage kind of fell within that.
No, that's just part of the city zoning code that you can't build any closer to the property line than 5 feet.
Okay.
That's the side unit. The front, you have to stay 20 feet back from the front property line and 25 feet in the rear property line.
But the garage isn't, cause that's clearly more than, less than 25 feet from the rear property line, but it
Yeah.
doesn't count, cause it's not a,
Yeah, pertinent structures only have to be 5 feet from any property line.
That's restrictions.
So,
okay,
So this is just, get this right, side yard setbacks, minimum 5 yards. Total has to be, or 5 feet. Total of the side yards has to equal 15 feet.
Mhm.
So to show the side yard interior graphically, you're kind of pinning them down. And the building official, when they get a building permit, will make sure that the building permit plans adheres to the zoning ordinance. Because it's already stipulated on the subdivision plan what the side yard setbacks need to be.
Mhm.
So I would recommend that you approve the plan and that the outstanding items in this letter, but for item number of my letter dated November 26th, November 22nd, 2023, be addressed prior to the planning commission chair signing the final plat and forwarding it to the city council, except for item number 6.
okay. And so we're still working on getting evidence of water and sewer availability.
Yes, they will have to provide that prior to you signing the plat.
but he has a letter from Newcastle County regarding the city. You saw that.
Oh,
He told me that all of these things are gonna be easy to get, so I didn't bear down to try to
We have a
confirm
letter,
that.
yeah, we have a letter from Newcastle County where they're
oh, so you'll be on the county.
sewer available.
Oh, that's right, sewer.
And
Okay.
municipal services obviously has the water there.
That should be, always confirmed before you sign the plat that creates new lots.
So I've never signed one of these things before. When and how do I do that?
We'll take care for you as staff. Mr. Diascanis' representative will submit a revised plan. We'll review it, make sure that it has all of the appropriate changes.
And then somebody's gonna give me a call and I need to swing by there and sign it. Okay,
And then it will be forwarded to the city council where they will have to consider it as a resolution. Because there's no public improvement being proposed, so this will have to be ministerially approved by city council.
okay. Okay. So I'll probably get a request to sign this before the next city council meeting?
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
I don't know number of copies and what needs to be recorded, but there's a signature block for you.
Okay.
So it just notifies the city council when they get a plan approved by the planning commission chair and the building official that it's been through this process.
Okay, so do I have an emotion, or is there any further discussion on this, questions? A motion to approve with the completion of the items, except for number 6 on the letter from AECOM to Diascanis Homes dated November 22nd, 2023. Does that make sense?
I'll motion to approve the subdivision plan based on that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know what, Chris, I'm just gonna use these because if they, if you can't see them, it doesn't matter. I have the smaller versions. Well, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
You
okay.
are.
All right, I just wanted to.
Can you just announce your name and address for the record?
Alice Real, 61 West Fourth Street, Newcastle.
And Alice is gonna present us with some update on the activities of the Flood Resiliency Committee.
Right, well, yes, flood resiliency, it says that's changed.
It's the same, the task force just changed. What happened was,
Task force had representatives, okay, and so instead of always extending on. They did away with the task force and started a new committee called the Flood Resiliency Committee,
oh, okay.
which is a different organization, but it's the same people and the same thing, it's just continuing instead of task force. It's a committee. Anyway, so this, let me tell you this while I'm standing here. This is the flood plain for the city of Newcastle. What this shows is that the 100-year flood possibility, which is not once every 100 years, it's 1% chance every year, and it can sort of increase because it hasn't been done for a while. It can get up to 26% every year, chance of having a 100-year flood. So these areas here are where there is flooding now, the flood zones. This is there are two different things. For 2050, you'll see the places that are now part of the flood zone, and also in 2100. These are the buildings. Actually, I think the colors. So this is the year 2050. These would be added, and then the 2100. The really light ones would be added. You can see the difference. I think that you can see it's subtle, but anyway. You won't be quizzed on that, so. Now I have some things to give to you, and this is just, I'm just gonna be mentioning them, so. But I thought you might be interested in having this stuff.
And Alice, just to briefly give some indication of what elevations we're talking about.
Right.
The existing 100-year floodplain in the city of Newcastle ranges from 8 feet to 10 feet. There's different elevations. And that's the first map that Alice showed. The second map is using DENREC's sea level rise scenario, generally accepted sea level rise scenario. It's a very rudimentary model. But in 2050, it accounts for a 2-foot rise in sea level. So 2 feet added on top of the existing floodplain. And then in 2100, it's approximately 5 feet additional, not 5 plus 2, but
Additional 3 feet?
an additional 3 feet
Right.
of potential elevation and sea level rise added on top of the existing floodplain elevation. Thank you.
I'll give one of these to you too. How's that? Okay. Now I wrote this out, so it's gonna seem a little awkward because there you are right in front of me instead of sitting from the dais, but anyway. Okay. So my name is Alice Reel. I'm the chair of the Flood Resiliency Committee. And thank you for inviting me tonight. What I'm gonna do is give a short summary of the flooding situation here in Newcastle and the efforts that have been made to address the problem. For quite some time, many people in Newcastle have been concerned about the potential flooding of the Delaware River and the damage that could do to our historic city. And with good reason, sea levels are rising, and with them, the chances of catastrophic floods in our area. These maps show where the floodplain is now and where it could be in 2050 and 2100. Now, this is an estimate, it's a kind of an educated guess, really. But sea level could be especially acute a problem in Newcastle. Global warming is causing sea levels to rise all over the world. Semi-permanent ice cover in Antarctica. When the temperatures rise, they melt, and that water is added to the ocean, makes the ocean rise, but also higher temperature, the ocean absorbs more heat and therefore expands. That's another reason why there's a sea level rise. But in Newcastle, we have a second problem, the subsidence of the land in this area. And that's the first thing I put on there. This is a problem up and down the East Coast. The ground is collapsing to a certain extent. One theory is that this subsidence is caused by oceanic activity, but most scientists believe the problem is man-made, caused by the pumping of groundwater for agriculture and other uses. So we hear a lot about Charleston, South Carolina, how it's it's disappearing into the water because it's just it's coming lower and lower in the water. And the truth is that Newcastle is on the same level as the Low Country and the Carolinas as far as this subsidence. So this is another reason why Newcastle is especially concerned about this. Because of these two factors, flood potential has been rising at an accelerating rate here. According to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, as Chris mentioned, sea levels could climb in Newcastle as much as 1.5 feet by 2050 and 5 feet by 2100. This is what these maps demonstrate. Recent comments by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is NOAA, indicate these might be underestimates. But we don't know. As I said, it's educated guesswork. So the city of Newcastle has been researching this problem with the help of AECOM and other partners like the Delaware Emergency Management Agency, which is DEMA, for many years, and has created a number of studies, the latest of which was the Vulnerability Assessment and Adaptation Plan, which was released in 2018. And that was created through the work of the City Preparedness Task Force, which was sort of the precursor to the Sea Level Rise Task Force. There was a group of citizens, experts, and officials that met with, had public meetings and everything, and they determined they looked at the entire situation, and then they came up with recommendations for what to do. Now, the second thing in your packet there is the recommendations they made for activities. And the yellow portion there that I highlighted is something that I think the Planning Commission may be especially interested in. It talks about buildings and stuff. By the way, I hope I'm not, I hope what I'm saying is not redundant. If I'm telling you something you already know. But the recent comprehensive plan actually said that the city should adapt all of the recommendations of the vulnerability assessment. So it's an important document, and the document in full is available from City Hall. And it's if you're interested in this subject, it's really worth looking at. Also, by the way, soon after that, there was a study that looked at the costs of the things that had been recommended in there. So it was a point where we were looking at what could possibly be done and what the cost might be. That's when the Sea Level Rise Task Force was formed. This was really the brainchild of Suzanne Souter, who's now the City Council President. And she put together a group of basically citizens. We weren't technically very up on this, but we were all interested in the subject, and we were all hoping to protect Newcastle. So we spent a lot of time, finding out all the information that we could come up with about the problem and what can be done and what had been done till then. And we were also asked to find funding for any projects that might be necessary. So during this process, we came across a program for the, you believe it or not, Department of Agriculture. It was run by an organization within the department called the National Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS. And they had a program called the Watershed Protection Program, which was had a lot of money. And what they tried to do was protect watersheds. Now, the Delaware watershed was specifically mentioned in the program about this organization. So I called the local representative, Ann Baldwin in Dover, and she really encouraged us. First of all, she came to the meeting and she talked about the program, and she encouraged the city to try to get the funding for anything that we would want to do on the coastline. So the city administrator and the city council president, Michael Platt at that time, wrote a letter to the NRCS through Ann, requesting that there be a preliminary investigation whether or not we were eligible for the money and whether there was a feasible project that could be done to protect the city. And so the letter was sent, and after quite a while, we were on pins and needles, but it was determined that we were eligible. So once that happened, then the question is, what were they going to do? And part of the investigative report, the next thing that you see there, is what they do is they determine whether you're eligible, but they also determine if something is feasible. So they come up with scenarios that, that are just that scenarios of what can be done to address the problem. Now, the first one was every report has to have that as the first one, to put it to what to compare it to. The second one was what they called structural, which meant to repair and replace and or create new ways to protect the city, like such as berms, walls, floodgates, that sort of thing, through the whole from the far northern end of the city to the far southern end, making sure that there was no way that the city could be damaged by the flood. Now, that project, as they we're looking at possibly something like that, was estimated to be worth about $37.5 million. The third idea was that they would tear down all those things that were in the flood zone. Well, that was not going to happen. And that also, believe it or not, was the most expensive program option, because I think it was $246 million to destroy those things that, they would have to. So that wasn't going to be either.
Alice, may I interrupt for a second? For us, it's this graph, correct?
Huh?
It's this graph, correct?
Yes.
For everybody
Yeah.
at the end of the PowerPoint.
Yes, I have those in there. And it also has what exactly they are. It's sort of the first page is sort of the narrative of what they are. And then there's a graph that shows you what they are and how much they're cost.
Thank you.
Those options cost. The fourth option was to protect the entire city in the same way, typically, but also have pumps, along the coastline, so that water that is now caught in the city could then be pumped out into the river once it can be. Now, the pumps are extremely expensive, and we're thinking, they say that it would be $156 million to do that. So now, we're in the program. So the question is now, what is going to happen? And Anne says that there are three processes. The first is planning, then engineering, and then construction. The planning should begin, I want to say the first quarter, but things get pushed back sometimes. So it's maybe the first half of the year. And what that will involve is lots of meetings and public meetings, and to devise a program that is specific and eccentric to this town, so that there won't be, like, we won't do option 2. It will be something that will bring together all those parts of the options that are the best for our town. It'll be very specific. So it could be 37 million, it could be 50 million. And if we're really, really good, it would be under 56 million, so that we could get those pumps to get the water out. But anyway, as I said, it's going to start in first half of the year, hopefully, first quarter. And as I said, there'll be plenty of public meetings. And so now the Sea Level Rise Task Force is now more, since we've done, we've found funding, and the program is going to be created. We don't have to do all those things anymore, but we changed into the Flood Resiliency Committee, so that we can act as liaison with the NRCS, who we know very well, obviously, we dealt with them. And also liaise between them and the city and any of the stakeholders here and the public, and maybe help put together public meetings and that sort of thing. So that's gonna be one of the things we do as the flood resilience. Yeah,
I have a quick question. So the funding of all this is entirely through this program, or would the city be responsible?
oh, I forgot, that's what I wanted to say. No money from the city, entirely funded by the federal government. This is what Ann tells us. So, yeah, now there will be costs. There'll be, license fees and, there'll be in-kind, manpower probably from, the works, department and that sort of thing. But, the actual construction and the planning and, the engineering will be paid for by the NRC, which is spectacular, really. It's, 37.5 million, even at the lowest, is 5 times the net, our annual budget of the city. So we wouldn't be able to do on our own. But anyway, so as I said, the new flood resiliency committee is also now going to be looking at flooding inside the city. The first meeting we had, one of the people who was there said, well, what about my backyard that floods constantly whenever it's, it's very rainy? And, areas like 6th and Harmony is constantly just water. And the problem is that it can't go into the river if the river's high, it's just not gonna happen. So there are ways to handle that, but they can be very expensive. But we're looking into that kind of flooding now. That's really rain event flooding, we get drainage from the rest of the county and also our own rain. So we've been asked to look into that and to see funding for that as well. The problem, it's not really a problem, but we don't know if the NRCS is actually going to take care of that by those pumps, if that will be taken care of already by the program that has already been approved. That will be part of the public discussion and discussion with the administration and the city administration. And so we'll know that. But see, even the planning is going to take about a year, because we'll have meetings and then they'll go back and they'll see what they can do and that kind of thing. And Ann said, now this is, high in the sky, but Ann says, if it goes over 250 million, we've got to ask the White House for approval. Okay, I don't think it's going to go over 250 million. If we get even the construction of something that will protect the city for the next century, until 2100, I feel like we'll have done a great job. So anyway, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wrote down here that I haven't said. Let me see. No, I guess so. So, if anybody have any questions about the situation or?
No? I think it's great that you guys have put in this much work and have options where before we had none.
And found some funding. That's fabulous.
Yeah, it's really great. And it's interesting that, I don't think that the NRCS has really done a project like this before, that is more conventional. They're usually doing some water works around farms and things like that. But we managed to get over the hurdle of being able to do it. It has to be 20% farm, or your area has to be 20% farm or freeway land.
Yeah.
But so we have a lot of parks and things like that. So because our density of homes is not great, it's one of the reasons we were able to qualify. Anyway. So no questions? Oh.
You did a good job explaining.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you for letting me come by and.
Alice, just to give you some framework, that the planning commission is interested in all of the various things that are going on in the city, so they can be better prepared for when it comes time to review the comprehensive plan and the 5-year cycle to determine if any changes need to be made or recommended to the city council. So we're in information gathering. We're going to do one of these on housing We sort of had an opening
I think that's wonderful.
with today's meeting, and you were gracious enough to jump in, so.
One thing about it though, one of the things about the vulnerability is that it really tells the city and maybe the planning commission as well to consider flooding in most of the decision thing, you know, so if you're going to approve this or that, it's almost like the environmental protection, you know, thing. If you're going to do something near the flood zone, never consider what's coming in the next, 50 years or 75 years. And just be aware that there are problems out there. For instance, this place right here, this building is in one of the most critical parts of the city, the most likely to be flooded. And it is a critical building for the city. It's like, remember when in the World Trade Center, they put the police communications office in World Trade Center? And then when the World Trade Center went down, they didn't have the police communication. This could happen to us too, because our police department is in the flood zone. And it was a big flood, you wouldn't be able to get in and out of here. So it's just something to keep in mind. I don't know if that's,
Actually, it is one of the questions we ask, and people have to ensure that it's not in the floodplain or that the elevation is raised so that it's.
right. Well, it's going to be, right now, I think our building codes are for the current floodplain, right? Not for the floodplain of 50 years from now. So I don't know if that's a question that should be, considered. I don't know.
Without getting into the weeds too much, the city, of course, has a floodplain ordinance.
Right.
In order for,
Can I see that one?
Absolutely.
Sorry, Chris.
in order for the citizens of a particular jurisdiction that has land use authority to be eligible for subsidized flood insurance through the feds, that community has to adopt minimum standards for floodplain protection. And that community's floodplain management program, there's a model ordinance out there published by the feds. And the more that you do that exceeds the minimum requirements of FEMA, is the more points and the more your citizens are eligible for subsidies. So every year or every few years, every jurisdiction is audited on their floodplain management program. Where was I getting at? And most programs require the first floor of a, let's say, residential dwelling to be elevated 1 foot above the floodplain elevation, the 100-year floodplain elevation. So if in the 100-year storm, which is, I'm going to say about 8 inches of water in 24 hours, it's a crazy amount of water. That was only supposed to happen once every 100 years. It's happening once every 25. Anyway.
Yeah. I used to live in a place that had 4 floods in 5 years. Yeah.
So the city's ordinance requires 18 inches of elevation of the first floor above the floodplain elevation. That's called freeboard, 18 inches of freeboard. And anything below that, any part of the residential structure that's below that elevation either has to be flood proofed or has to be vented where the water passes through. And that's for new construction. The DG zone developments that we've seen, they've all been done via fill, where the developers have filled the land with the approval of FEMA and the city to get the site out of the floodplain. And then even though it's out of the floodplain, the parking is occurring on the floodplain. So the garrison, the first floor of the garrison is elevated well above the floodplain elevation. But somebody was talking about elevating above the floodplain.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the city's ordinance has a slightly more restrictive requirement.
So when Chris talks about subsidies, what he means is your flood insurance will go down.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we really we're looking looking at, you know, at the task force. And if this project is completed, of course, who knows what kind of insurance there will be, but, you know, it would make a big difference in people's insurance if there's still a situation like that. Anyway.
Alice, I do
Thank you
have
very
a
much.
follow-up question, I'm sorry. So in all of this, it discusses, raising the dikes, the pumps, property purchases, things like that.
Right.
You had touched on rainwater, is I don't wanna mess the name up, so I'm not gonna give it the whole thing, but is the committee, looking into the simpler fixes on the rainwater aspect, such as, collapsing drain basins and filled drains basins? Cause I know there's a handful that are filled with leaves. There's one very prevalent one that has marsh reeds growing out of it. And addressing those topics or those issues to help rectify the situation.
Absolutely. We're just starting. And as a matter of fact, we're trying to go to maybe other places that have the similar problem and see how they've addressed it and that kind of thing. Because yeah, there's so many different ways. But for instance, somebody said, well, there are little side rills kind of from the dike, and you can just, excavate them and but apparently they fill up immediately. So that's not really something we could do. There are solutions that are very expensive, like cisterns, under the parks and things where, the water goes in, and then when the flooding is done, then they pump them out. It'd be great if we could do that, but who knows?
So, and I'm sorry, I apologize. Maybe I wasn't specific enough. My comment was more directed towards stormwater management, as in like your street drains and things like that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, from what I understand, the city is going to soon put up signs that send in each street, which says when the street cleaning is, and start giving out warnings, and soon after that, tickets for people who are parked on the street when they should be off the street for the street cleaning, which they've done.
And are they gonna be sucking out the drain basins when they do that? Cause I know they have the ability to with the new street sweeper.
Yeah, I don't know that part, but that's certainly something. We're gonna be looking at everything from the smallest thing to the highest thing, whatever we can.
The low hanging fruit.
Right,
Yeah,
and that's,
exactly.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I can probably rattle off, I know where there's one or two collapsing, I know where there's a couple that are filled up.
Yeah.
So
Well, that'd be
little
great.
things that,
Yeah.
when Chris said low hanging fruit.
Anyway, you were looking at me quizzically though. Are you not aware of the street clean or confused?
It's just cleaning the street isn't gonna address the sewers that are full of dirt and leaves and stuff. It's
Well,
more
those
than
have to
that.
be cleaned out, but we don't want to add any more. Plus, it's the law that if we don't do it, we could be fined heavily. And we haven't been audited, I guess, recently, so we haven't gotten any fines, but we could certainly for, dumping the leaves into the river, basically, and that's a problem as well. Anyway, okay. Well, thank you
Great,
very much.
thank you, sir. Does anybody have any other comment, information they want to share? Maybe. My only comment is I hope everybody has a happy holiday and a great new year. We'll see you in January. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.